Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you are not, I am EDJ. So last time we looked at, the beginning of the Byzantines by Overly Sarcastic Productions, and I surprisingly knew a bit, but it helped to watch the Belisarius videos and some of the forums I visited, and some of your comments, so it helped. But now we're kind of at, like I said, all I know about the Byzantines, or at least all that I did know, was mainly Justinian, right? Like, I knew who Emperor Justinian was, I knew who Belisarius was, but that's it. I'm very ignorant of this point in Roman history. The Eastern Roman portion on its own, I basically do not know much about, So, yeah, I'm in completely uncharted territory, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about the eastern part of Rome and just how it carried on until its end. And yeah, I'm surprised they even have a golden age after Justinian, after all the territory they lost. So I'm shocked that they even have a golden age at this point, but I want to see it. And I heard some people talking about like, oh, after Belisarius and Justinian, there were some really great, like leaders. Like some people kept mentioning Basil too. And I'm like, I don't know who that is, but yeah, Basil too, I don't know, but I'm hoping that by the end of one of these videos, I'll know, and if he even brings up Basil for that long, but, I don't know, we'll see. I'm hoping to just learn more about overall and just see, just how things went. So, I always put the link to the videos I react to in the description. And with that said, and without any further ado, let's learn about the Byzantine Empire, the Golden Age.
The Byzantine Empire has long maintained a delicate balance of simultaneously doing fantastic and also being constantly in peril. Normally this would be a contradiction, but the Byzantines made Golden Disaster Empire their entire damn brand. As we'll see over the next 500 years, the Dark Ages brought some genuinely brilliant reforms, while the Golden Ages endured some catastrophic failures. But just like the Romans of old, the Byzantines kept on keeping on despite the odds and earned their place as one of the longest lasting empires in history. So, to see how the Byzantines survived the Middle Ages and gained their golden reputation, let's do some history. When last we left our purple-robed friends, the entire southern half of the empire had been swiftly yoinked by the shiny new Muslim caliphate, and within a century these new
Dude, that's painful to watch. Just them shrinking. I do know about, like, the final end, like, their conquest from them being conquered by Mehmed II, the Conqueror, and they were just literally like here, and it's really sad to watch. But yeah, this is confusing to keep track of. Like, I guess you have to do a lot of seedings because everything's different. Like, look, this little portion right here, like, they have enough autonomy compared to all this conquered land. Like, I don't know, I'm like, how do you keep track of this, guys? How are you running this? But yeah, it's interesting to me, but it seems very confusing, these little patches around, and, like, managing them, but
neighbors had landed on Constantinople's doorstep on 2 separate occasions, only to be repelled by the very fires of hell itself. See, the Byzantines had a little trick called Greek fire, a secret substance that could be shot from a siphon at an incoming navy and burn down everything from the mast to even the water.
Yeah, and apparently this was, like, lost, or that's what I've heard about it, that it was lost to time. We don't know how to make, Greek fire. But man, what a cool ability. Like, they basically had, like, yeah, like, the power to set things aflame, I guess. I mean, probably flamethrower is not the right term to use, but you know what I mean. Like, that's pretty awesome, Oh, man.
But that's not all the Byzantines had learned from the fall of Rome. In addition to their functionally impenetrable Theodosian walls, they maintained hundreds of underground cisterns to fortify their water supply. No city on Earth was better defended than Constantinople, but the same thing couldn't be said for the Byzantine provinces, as the Muslim armies were having their run of the place all the way up into Anatolia. It was only in 740 that Emperor Leo III finally held the eastern line, and his son Constantine V fortified the other problematic frontier by pushing back against the Bulgarians in the west. So it took a century and a half there, but hey, credit where it's due, that's a pretty solid recovery. However, there's a more literal reason that this stretch is considered the Dark Ages, and it has to do with icons. The Byzantines were a rather artistic bunch, and they loved to have images of Jesus, Mary, and friends in their churches and in their homes. But in the eyes of people like Emperor Leo, this was beginning to look a lot like idolatry, where images are worshipped more piously than even God. His response, simple enough, was to smash every last image he could get his hands on. So, starting in 726, he and his fellow iconoclasts destroyed every mosaic, fresco, statue, and doodle in sight. Constantine V
Oh my gosh, all that beautiful art. Dude, that kind of hurts my soul. I'm like, dude, not all that beautiful art and paintings, you know? Just keep around for artistic, you know, like, appreciation if nothing else, like, you know? Oh man, that's sad.
Eventually doubled down and even began persecuting the clergy for spurring this apparent idolatry. Meanwhile, across the Adriatic, the Pope in Rome was justifiably horrified, and Byzantine Ravenna took the occasion to declare independence, which is why their mosaics are some of the few to actually survive this mess. After Constantine died, his wife Irene called a council to outlaw iconoclasm, but Emperor Leo V reinstated it, and then eventually Empress Theodora re-outlawed it for good in 843. The final rules were that statues are no bueno, but all 2D art was chill, so the Byzantines got back to work with gorgeous frescoes and mosaics. Greek art would proceed to snub visual realism in favor of more stylized figures with enough gold decoration to give a Protestant to Caesar, and that style governs Eastern Orthodox art to this day. So while I weep on a weekly basis for how pathetically few pieces of original art survived iconoclasm and the Ottomans, the dreaded double whammy, I can take comfort knowing that the Byzantine style has well over 1,000 years of continuity. But for all the damage the iconoclasts did to art, they made some crucial reforms to the Byzantine military and government by, well, making them the same thing. See, back in the old Imperial Roman days, the provinces had no innate defenses, and they had to wait for the legions to show up from Jupiter knows where. Clearly, that model didn't work anymore, so the Byzantines reconfigured their armies and their provinces to fit. In the 600s and 700s, the provinces were gradually redrawn as themata, with the governor taking on the additional role of strategos and overseeing both the civic and the military care of his thema. And in place of the old-fashioned imperial legions, Byzantine themata each had their own army, staffed with citizens from that specific thema and funded by land grants within that thema, so every soldier had a tangible stake in the well-being of the empire. Though the empire did shrink to about—
Dang, that's smart. Yeah, it gives more incentive to, yeah, defend. Basically, each part is— that's smart, because I have heard that the Byzantines became much better at, like, defensive warfare, and those reforms are just— yeah, I could see— yeah, that's just great. You know, they've shrunk, but they're also strengthening themselves in a funny way to think about it. But yeah, that must have been insane back then, like when we saw early Roman videos. We're still covering some. Yeah, some province would just be attacked, like, alright, wait, we'll be there, and they'd take like months probably to get there from one end to the province to another. So yeah, this is better for just defense overall.
half its size between 600 and 800, the extremely perilous eastern border went from being an unmitigated disaster zone to a fortress. The Byzantines were stronger and safer than ever thanks to the thema reforms. So that's the big picture swerve, but the tactics and composition of the Byzantine army also got an upgrade. While infantry remained a staple, the Byzantines kept up with trends by remodeling the old Roman legionary into the fancy new scutatoi. Namely, they ditched the scutum for the hotness that is the kite shield, which explains why the name scutatoi literally means shield boys. And there to support our favorite shieldy boys were the toxotai archers, but the biggest and the baddest unit in the Byzantine army was the cataphract. These guys were basically hoplites on horses, with the steed and the rider decked out head to hoof in scale armor. The name technically means fully armored, but I personally prefer to translate it as full metal cavalry. Cataphracts were first introduced as a counter to the Arabic cavalry, which otherwise ran circles around the poor defenseless scutatoi, but eventually the cataphracts became the core of the Byzantine army and a byword for Byzantine power. Infantry and archers would weaken an enemy's line, and then the cataphracts would swoop in to hammer through the weak points and just shatter the enemy's formations. GG. And as an empire that's about 75% coast, the Byzantines had ports to protect on all sides, in the Aegean, along the Mediterranean, and on the Black Sea, so they maintained a pretty beefy navy. In the world's best case of why mess with perfection, the Byzantines still used a version of the trireme some 2,000 years later as their prime.
Wow. I did not know that. Oh my goodness. I guess I guess it must have been that effective, right? They're still using it. But yeah, the cataphract, you know, the armored, you know, horsemen, kind of like, yeah, the Byzantines carried into the medieval age. So like, I was thinking like, oh, like armored knights, you know, armored horses, just like, yeah. I love seeing the evolution. It is insane how far Rome came. When you see, like, the earliest parts of Rome, like, I remember when we were watching, like, Pyrrhus of Epirus by Kings and Generals, early Rome, and now here, late Rome, and just how far they evolved, it is insane.
Primary ship. The Dromon, as it became known, had been upgraded with a lateen sail and got absolutely loaded with catapults and ballistae. Plus, instead of simply ramming into enemy ships like some ancient Athenian doof, the Dromoi were equipped with spurs to smash enemy oars and immobilize them for ease of burning and or boarding. Slick upgrade. Unfortunately, the navy wasn't quite enough to stop repeated Muslim incursions into Crete, Sicily, and Sardinia, but they dutifully protected the mainland coasts, the islands of the Aegean, and the many trade routes that passed through Constantinople via the Bosphorus River. With iconoclasm over and the empire no longer teetering on the edge of total collapse, the Byzantines entered 2 centuries of prosperity and relative peace, starting with Basil I, who I really can't help but picture as just a leaf. A line of Macedonian emperors guided the Byzantine Empire through its golden age, the peak of imperial prestige and of its cultural influence abroad. With the Muslim armies to the east more or less handled, the Byzantines turned their attention to the Bulgarians and used a clever mix of religious diplomacy to pacify them via conversion to Christianity. They did the same thing with Tsar Vladimir of the Kievan Rus, which set early Russia with its quasi-Greek Cyrillic alphabet and its Byzantine-leaning brand of Eastern Christianity. In return, Vladimir hooked the Byzantines up with the Varangian Guard, a legendary band of Scandinavian mercenaries who served as the emperor's royal guard for centuries. Now, this was no Pax Romana, so the Byzantines still had to fight on many fronts, and the Bulgarians even swiped northern Greece in the 900s, later recovered by the Herculean efforts of Emperor Basil II a century later, but compared to the way that thing—
Okay, finally we got to Basil II. Oh, wow, he took back a lot, didn't he? Wait. I was about to be like, oh, look at all that land loss, but then
covered by the Herculean efforts of Emperor Basil.
He took some more here. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he helped get back a lot right there.
A century later, but compared to the way that things were, the Byzantines were doing great. Meanwhile, Constantinople had never been better. By 1000 AD, it held 500,000 people and remained the largest, best defended, and most magnificent city in the world. Hagia Sophia was one of countless churches to get gorgeous new decorations after iconoclasm. And times clearly changed, but Constantinople remained a beautiful window into the classical world, with Roman-style churches, a cartoonishly huge chariot stadium, and marble as far as the eye could see. And all across the empire, Byzantine architects were hard at work building gorgeous urban cathedrals and cliffside monasteries. But funnily enough,
this architecture is beautiful. The Byzantine aesthetic is second to none. Just beautiful.
Our best looks at peak Byzantine art come not just from outside the empire, but from its rivals. To the west, Venice and the Normans made for some of Constantinople's oddest frenemies, because much as they used spears and ships to snag some Byzantine power and prosperity for themselves, they were the most enthusiastic adopters of the Byzantine style. Seriously, between St. Mark's Basilica and the Palatine Chapel, Italy is the best place to see Golden Age art. Then, of course, there's the way the Ottomans co-opted the Byzantine aesthetic, but whoo-hoo, that is a problem for later. Culturally, things had never been better, but politically, the cracks in the proverbial mosaic were starting to show. The Byzantines had been steadily reaching back out to the Balkans and out of Anatolia, but the empire was much more comfortable being on the defensive than the offensive at this point, and the carefully constructed themata system began suffering from bloat. Strategoi got complacent and ignored their civic duties to play monopoly men within their thema, and between Theodosian walls and gold-covered domes, cushy bureaucrats in Constantinople barely raised their heads from their books. So each camp blamed the other for the empire's problems, and both did exactly nothing to fix it. The emperor, for his part, didn't help matters by completely ignoring the themata and relying more and more on the tagma, a standing army meant primarily for campaigning. This put the Byzantines in an extremely precarious situation, spread way too thin and poorly prepared to face new threats, like trying to stab your enemies with a limp spaghetti. To the west, the Normans swooped into southern Italy to conquer the last little Byzantine pockets, and
I recognize the Normans. Wow, we've made it far, you know? I'm like, oh, we are here.
east, the Seljuk Turks dunked on the Byzantines so badly that Anatolia just disappeared, and they didn't even have to try that hard to do it.
Oh my goodness. Oh man. Yeah, I guess they started losing track of their greatest strength, which was their defense. And he mentioned he changed the standing army. He ended up using that more. Some of, the people in charge of the provinces started lacking. It just all fell apart. Oh man, but this hurts, guys. Every time I see them keep losing land, I'm like, you guys are doing great, but you're also like losing so much land.
So badly that Anatolia just disappeared, and they didn't even have to try that hard to do it. Half the Byzantine army deserted en route to the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, and the generals made a series of miscalculations on their way to an entirely avoidable outcome. By 1075, the empire had never been smaller or weaker. You'd hope that the Greeks would know a little thing or two about hubris, but apparently not. And unfortunately,
yeah, Greek mythology, right? The Greeks never learn from hubris. It's kind of their thing.
For our Grek boys here, the 1000s only frayed the already dodgy relationship between the churches in Constantinople and Rome. Justinian's big shiny idea of one church and one empire went kaput as soon as the southern half of the Mediterranean went poof, and Byzantine authority in Rome remained only nominal at best. When the Papal States officially split in 754, it was only a formality. Communication between East and West was already tricky because of how few Byzantines spoke Latin and how few Romans spoke Greek. Plus, tips like iconoclasm exacerbated disagreements about whether the Pope had supreme spiritual authority or whether the Byzantines had the right to mind their own business. These views were fundamentally incompatible, and this multi-century spat came to a head when a Roman delegate excommunicated the entire Byzantine church in the middle of Hagia Sophia in the middle of Mass. Damn. So the Greeks responded with
ouch! What the heck? You couldn't wait after the Mass, dude? Dude, that's wild. It is so weird. Like, the Papal States, it's like, here's Rome. It's Rome. Yeah, sure, you could, some people call them Greeks, but they're Rome, And it's like, yeah, some people kind of wanted to ignore that, right? Or wanted to just, yeah, it's so weird to me. But just this divide, and it's weird because it's like, they're Rome, but they don't have their namesake. They don't have where they came from. It is a wild history the Romans went on, guys. I'm still like, it's just so strange to me.
Communications of their own, and just like that, we've got a schism. While nobody at the time quite recognized the implications, this marked the final split of ties between the Catholic Church in Rome and the Eastern Orthodox Church. But one Byzantine emperor saw this as a rare opportunity. Alexios I ended nearly a decade of civil war to assume the throne in 1081, and his Komnenoi dynasty oversaw a remarkable revival of Byzantine fortunes through the 1100s. He held the empire steady for nearly 4 decades, made new trade agreements with the Venetians, and hatched a clever plan to regain Anatolia. He went to Pope Urban with the offer to recognize papal supremacy in exchange for a dispatch of soldiers to help with the Byzantine reconquest. But Urban's hearing was a little selective, because he ended up sending along several armies worth of European bandits who wanted to, let me make sure I'm reading this right, retake the Holy Land.
Oh no. The Crusades. Oh no, here we are. We've made it, guys. We really are just in the medieval era now. It's just so weird that Rome made it from like antiquity all the way to like so close, like in the year 14 something, 60 something, I think. Oh man, you have to give it to Rome. Their perseverance is probably their greatest, most recognizable attribute, and it never went away. They hung on for a long time.
Huh. Well, that wasn't the plan at all! Alright, so now Alexios had to wrangle this box of oops, all crusaders and point them towards Jerusalem so they didn't go crusading all over his empire instead. Unsurprisingly, the crusaders were much more excited to conquer their own lands than to bother restoring lost Byzantine territories, and subsequent crusades would only entangle the Byzantines further into the mess that is medieval European politics and earn them nothing but antagonism from their western neighbors. Meanwhile, the Normans were constantly poking and prodding into Greece, and soon enough the Venetians had a monopoly on Byzantine trade. But despite all all that, the Komnenoi left the empire a lot better than they first got it, having reclaimed coastal Anatolia, modernized the economy by Venetian supervision, and continued to make churchloads of gold-covered art.
It's insane. They keep losing land, they gain back a little more, and then they just lose more. Like, it's like this weird trend I'm starting to see.
Honestly, I feel like that's kind of the Byzantine motto at this point. Definitely precarious, but hey, it could have been a lot worse. And we'll find out how this eternally perilous situation resolves in part 3, but for now, let's recap. When we picked up this chapter of Byzantine history, the empire was in a really bad way, what with the hemorrhaging provinces and smashing all of their art. And it's not an accident that they went on to steady their empire and revitalize their culture. The Byzantines survived and then dug themselves out of the Dark Ages by being clever and not giving up. The Thema system is a genius innovation in statecraft, and it bought the Byzantines an entire golden age to work with. And of course, as time went on, they got a little careless, but when things got dire, they persevered and turned things around again.
That's Rome. That's just Rome. They perseverance, tenacity, never give up despite how bad things get. That's just Rome, man. Like, respect, you know?
I don't just like Byzantine history in spite of their setbacks, I love Byzantine history because they're a golden disaster empire, damn it. Remember, in life, it doesn't matter how you get knocked down, or how you lose all of North Africa, or all of Greece, or Anatolia too. Jeez, those guys have really been through a lot. What matters is that you keep on trying no matter what, because golden ages can dawn when you least expect it. Thank you so much for watching. Stories like this remind me that
that was great. That was so interesting, and I really love just seeing this part of Rome play out that I'm so, you know, ignorant of. And I'm really looking forward to the next video, which is Anna Komnena. Either way, we're getting there. So I will be seeing you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone.